For those of you who've been following my channel, you know that I'm a huge proponent on short-term rentals or Airbnbs here in Calgary, especially with the tourism that we experience here. So what we're going to talk about today is some of the differences between the short-term rental and the long-term rental market. I know that you've been in Calgary for a little while. You've run this business for a few years now. You've got quite a few doors. Why don't you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I am the CEO of Realty Rental Management. We have 65 doors and counting. It has really exploded over the past couple of years. Calgary is a prime market for short-term rentals. And what we found is we have a recipe for success, and we're happy to share that with as many people as want to get involved.
Yeah, man, I totally agree, especially after seeing some of the projections and some of the numbers that you've actually been able to kind of uncover for a few of your clients. So what we're going to do today is just kind of get right into it. So what is one of the biggest advantages, in your opinion, from a short-term rental compared to a long-term rental?
Well, I think the biggest one and the one that everyone is most focused on is the money. Show me the money, right? So I think for us, there's a greater return on investment 99% of the time if you went with a short-term rental versus a long-term rental option. So when you look at the numbers make sense, and the numbers for me drive data or drive the decisions behind our decision making here.
I mean, I like that a lot, and I really like how you worded that. So I think that really goes to talk about the highs and the lows, right? Because we're going to talk about misconceptions in another video, which we'll touch on them. But when you talk about like the highs and the lows of Airbnb, right, you're going to take a little bit more of a risk, if you would, but the highs are pretty good. So maybe touch on that.
Yeah, for sure. So Calgary is a cyclical market. So anyone who's been in short-term rentals here, I always say the warmer the weather, the higher the rates. The colder the weather, the lower the rates. So for me, that really gives you an idea of how demand is here in Calgary. So you do have lower lows, if you will, when the weather is colder in the winter. But once the weather starts to turn warm and we hit the summertime, that's when you start to see very high rates. But you are riding a little bit of a roller coaster. But it's a predictable roller coaster. So you know where you're going to be. So that's where we come along and help educate our clients in terms of what they can expect. And you touched on it. We provide 12-month financial projections, and we provide an average at the bottom. And I say if you focus on the average, everything else is a little bit of a distraction as you go through the year. But there's some very good days that happen in that year, and Stampede is obviously one of the best.
For sure. So what we were talking about with those highs and lows is there's actually a lot more property care that goes into this, right? Where, you know, as a landlord, if you would, for a long-term tenant, you have someone locked in there for 12 months. You typically have to give them 24-hour notice before you walk through. Why don't you touch on a little bit of that property care? Because after every guest, you have to clean the property, right? So I think you're going to see a lot more maintenance issues. You're going to be in there a lot more. So
yes, for us, we have to have a property in a presentable fashion for every single guest.
Every time.
You have to change it over. It has to be cleaned perfectly. It has to be inspected. It has to look like the photos. And you're doing that over and over and over again. But the thing is, for tenants, I mean, the tenant can occupy for a year, 2 years. You go through the property, and then there can be significant amount of wear and tear or damage because they're occupying it every single day.
Yeah.
They're living there. They're using all the appliances. They're using every area because that's their dwelling,
right.
Primary dwelling. Whereas with short-term rentals, you're not occupied every single day. About 80%, 90% of the time, depending on the property type, but they're not using the stove every single day. They're not using the fridge. They may come and just use some of the areas. So your wear and tear is far lower, but you're also getting a lot more eyes on the property. So that's big for us, is being able to keep an eye on the property and make sure that it's being cared for.
Right. It's almost like a paradigm shift too, right? Because you think, you know, more people through the property equals more maintenance, right? And yeah, of course, you might spend a little bit more on maintenance depending on, you know, the property type and where it's located and stuff like that, but you still are in there more often than you would be with a long-term. So if you're thinking about long-term assets, you're going to have a little bit of a better outlook of where your asset could be depending on how good the property manager is and what suggestions they make. So one of the things that I think is really cool about Airbnb is the fact that you can use it pretty much whenever you want, right? When you're a long-term landlord or long-term tenant, you can't just go in and use the house when you want. So maybe touch on that for a couple seconds.
Yeah, that is a huge perk. So we often deal with people who are investors that are not from Calgary, but they say, I love Calgary. I'd love to come visit. Maybe I want to have my friends or family be able to use the property. hey, as long as it's not booked, you can use it. You know, with us, we have no restrictions, no blackout dates. Obviously, we prefer that, you know, you don't stay there during Stampede, and I'm sure you would too if you're looking at it from a financial perspective. However, it's there for your personal use and to go and enjoy it. It's completely different than a long-term rental. And I think there's so many benefits that we've already touched on here. And there's a lot more as you get into the ownership piece.
Perfect. So the last one that I'm going to touch on before maybe you share a couple ways that people can get a hold of you if they have questions is pricing, right? Yes, your highs are highs, your lows are low, but you have a dynamic pricing structure. It's not $1,200 for 12 months. It's some months you make $3,000 or some months your revenues are $4,000. Like maybe touch a little bit on how that's a beneficial to a homeowner.
Yeah. So when we look at our pricing model, we are constantly using our algorithm, pricing algorithm, and fine tuning it. So if there is an increase in demand, it automatically will detect that in the market, but we're able to take advantage of that. Hey, if they announce a second Stampede, great. We're gonna go and change those pricing immediately. We'll automatically detect it, and we'll be able to take advantage of that increase in demand. Whereas with long-term rentals, you don't get that ability to just change the rent midway through the lease because the market's hot.
Yeah.
For us, we can do that every single day at any point. Consequently, if demand did come down like it did with COVID, we're able to move our prices down to meet that, to still be competitive, to still be able to have the property occupied at the optimal rate.
And actually, I would love to touch on that in another video about how the pandemic and just the tourism of Calgary really helped kind of excel your business, right? And we're not going to touch on it today, but it's a very real thing. And
you'd be surprised of the impact that it had. So we'll have to have another video to discuss that.
Exactly. So for the viewers out there, for anyone who's interested in Airbnbs and they want to just maybe ask some questions or build a relationship, feel free to email Duncan, reach out to him and ask him some questions. You can also reach out to me if you have some real estate related questions. Duncan, do you maybe have like a website or something that people can just go and look up a little bit about your business?
Yeah, you can reach me directly if you want, Duncan at yourkey.ca. If you want to take a look at our services, yourkey.ca. Keep it simple. If you want to find us on Instagram and check our social media, we're primarily on Instagram, but if you want to check us there, at yourkey.ca.
That's awesome, Duncan. Hey, man, well, I really appreciate your time and coming on here and explaining some of the differences between short-term and long-term. So if anyone has any questions, please make sure to reach out. So, Duncan, we'll see you on the next one, brother.
Perfect. Take care.
Peace.